Hi, this is Ryan at Cannabis.com. It is the 23rd of August 2017, and I wanted to talk about a couple issues that are going on in politics right now that could affect everybody, not only in the United States, but all over the world. Cannabis prohibition ending is very likely, at least it's a high possibility that Donald Trump, the sitting U.S. president's friend, Roger Stone, will be lobbying to end prohibition, to hold Donald Trump to his promises, to, what Donald Trump said, and I've got this documented in my post here. I wrote about it last year. I wrote about it in 2015, actually, on my blog. And he promised to defend medical marijuana rights and to defend states' rights. So if states pass laws, he would get the federal government out of their business. That's what Donald Trump promised. That's what Roger Stone wants to lobby him for, or at least he's starting a group, a cannabis coalition industry group, and his purpose is to, lobby or appeal to his friend Donald Trump to keep his promises. So this is only a problem because the liberals don't like Roger Stone. They say, oh, he's racist, he's xenophobic, the same, diatribe, the same crap they always say. But they have no problem supporting a national socialist. If George Soros was to change his political ideology and was to come right out and say he was a Nazi, they wouldn't mind. It's fine. But he was a Nazi. He was an actual Nazi. And they support him, and they take his money, and they let him change cannabis laws, or at least take on his ideologies and his ambitions to change laws in different ways, whether they're positive ways or negative ways. But Roger Stone, that's a no-go because he supports Trump, he was Trump's friend, and of course then that makes him a xenophobe, a Nazi, a racist, or whatever, right? But this is serious business. And when the left isolates 50% of the voters, or more than 50%, obviously because Donald Trump was elected, when they isolate conservatives because they're conservatives, that means they're losing half of their power, half of their momentum in politics. People that are for the legalization, decriminalization, nullification of cannabis prohibition laws, if they don't have the other half of the bird, then they're flying half a bird, and that doesn't get them too far. They fly around in circles with half a bird. With one wing, you don't go too far. At least you don't go too far straight. Anyway, the point is here, as I wrote 2 articles, and this one talks about this Cannabis Expo. People are boycotting it because Roger Stone is there. The Cannabis World Congress and Business Exposition, CWCBExpo. He's a keynote speaker, and there's a bunch of liberals complaining, blah, blah, blah. And then the other thing I wrote was about how I-502 got passed in Washington State, the legalization lie. Now, I've been against I-502 since before I-502. Before I-502 was even a concept, I made videos about what would happen if we didn't pass an initiative like I-1068 in Washington. I made this video, it's in another link up here. Yeah, right there. In this video in 2010 I made many accurate predictions that no one in my circle or colleagues pursuing cannabis liberty initiatives such as I-1068 imagined would come true. I saw that marijuana was becoming more accepted in general public's perception of its safety and productivity, as it should, and I saw that people are excited about citizens' initiatives such as I-1068 and I-1149. So I predicted that if we didn't get cannabis decriminalization on the ballot before another group with less noble intentions did, then we would see cannabis go to a state of something similar to big tobacco or big pharma, meaning a monopoly of sorts. And that's exactly what happened. And you can watch this video and see that. It obviously this heading on xcannabis.net from August 22nd, 2017. And what I wanted to point out here is that with everybody complaining about Roger Stone, the same people, that are involved in liberal politics and legalization and all the other, liberal agendas, push out a conservative that wants to help liberate cannabis because he's a conservative. But they take money from and they support people like George Soros. I don't ever see these liberal people that are in initiatives for cannabis legalization that complain about people like Roger Stone or Donald Trump ever complain about George Soros. But he has made it well known that he was a Nazi. He was actually a Nazi in the 1940s. He actually accompanied SS troops to the homes of known Jewish people in the community, and he would liquidate their stuff as they were sent off to a concentration camp. And he was asked about it, I believe it was it NBC? I've got it here. I'm going to have to pause the video and come back because it is serious stuff. Yeah, see, I've got a longer version of it and a shorter version of it. I'm going to go ahead and just pause this and go to that. Okay, I found it. It's actually at the top link here, the longer video, but it gets right into it from the beginning, so you don't have to watch it for very long to see.
And my understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all.
Of all the financial titans and philanthropists of the 20th century, none are more complex or mysterious than George Soros.
And so that's what we have as the liberal source of funding, the progressive Democrats' source of funding, their champion, their hero, when, I think it was in Washington, they outspent their detractors of cannabis legalization under I-502 by 400 times what the competitor spent. The competitor, the opposition to I-502, collectively spent like $15,800. And I think it was $33 million that the New Approach Washington campaign spent compared to that $15,000. And a big chunk of that came from both George Soros and Peter Lewis. George Soros has funded many of these legalization campaigns and also the medical marijuana campaigns. But his angle, I think, in a lot of ways, and this is also talked about in these videos, is that he likes to sow discord. He likes to interrupt sound and strong currencies with political disruption, political mayhem. And then when the mayhem and the politics and the economy crashes, even temporarily, he buys in. He gets a bunch of the stock, he gets a bunch of the currency. He buys the currency at discount rates, then steps back and stops interrupting a society, with the corruption and the mayhem and the discord, and lets them get strong again, gives them 10 years or whatever, gets them strong again, and then liquidates the currency that he bought wholesale and makes fantastic amounts of money. And if anybody knows anything about I-502 is how absolutely, how much infighting, how it was absolutely tense and everybody was divided and fighting against each other, and that people who wanted legalization, people who wanted, liberty and cannabis freedom, were fighting with each other. And it was brought on by George Soros money, no doubt about it. The ACLU, the Democratic Party, did not back I-1068, did not back I-1149, which were much more liberating initiatives in Washington State for cannabis that came before I-502. They wouldn't touch that. But when it came to I-502, not only did they get on board with that, but they denounced anybody who rejected it, and they outright in public on the news rejected I-1068 and I-1149. Both the Democratic Party and Allison Holcomb of the New Approach Washington campaign of the ACLU denounced supporting Sensible Washington's initiatives. But when anybody spoke out against I-502, they were labeled as, prohibitionist or whatever. Russ Belville wanted to brand a swastika on Steve Sarich's forehead, using some line from Inglourious Bastards, the show with Brad Pitt, and was talking about how these people who reject legalization need to be branded like the Nazis were and Inglourious Bastards and stuff. It was just, there was so much discord coming from NORML, coming from the ACLU, coming from the Democratic Party, and they wanted some of that George Soros money, so they were defending it bitterly, and very bitterly. And so, of course, a lot of us that wanted real freedom and not all these new prohibitions, and there's a whole bunch of new ones. Like the biggest group of cannabis users, the biggest demographic, which is people under the age of 21, from like 14 to 21, now under I-502 will get a felony for simple possession of marijuana. For having so much as a joint, it's a felony for under 21. Before, it was only a misdemeanor. DUIDs have went through the roof. I've documented that in another blog that I've got about monopolies. And it's crazy how much, and you can see the sources from the state of Washington health department and whatnot. Let's see. Yeah, so with DUIDs up, instead of simple possession, which was a misdemeanor, somebody had a joint or whatever, it was a misdemeanor. Now, because of the new DUID limits, 5 nanogram limits, DUIDs have skyrocketed. You can see in 2009, 18.2, 2010, 19.4, 2011, 20.2, 2012, 18.6. And then, after legalization, after the 2012 vote, it jumped from 18.6% to 24.9%. That's a 6%, 6.3% increase. And it went up from there, another 4%, another 3% anyway, 3.1% from 2013 to 2014. Those were the only numbers I could find so far, but there's more to that. And you can see that, the death rates, the traffic incidents have not gone up significantly, but in fact they've gone down. In 2014 they went down 4%, but still cops are arresting people at higher rates of DUID, even though traffic incidents are not up. And so that and the felony, you can see right here. Another factor is that has changed in I-502 is that it's now a felony for a minor under the age of 21 who possesses marijuana in Washington State, whereas before it was only a misdemeanor. And this is from Crosscut, and they talk about it here, about a case, a specific case, and they interviewed the, I think it was the Washington State Patrol about it, and they were like, oh yeah, it is a felony now. It wasn't before I-502, but it's a felony now. They blamed things like SB 5052, but everything changed in Washington for cannabis when I-502 started to pass, when they started to present that as an alternative to what had been proposed over the last 13 years that had been working fine. And then, yeah, of course, the initiative started, and then the legislature jumped in, and now the state of Washington has a huge incentive to keep it the way it is. Deep prohibition, Prohibition 2.0, and high taxation, because they're getting hundreds of millions of dollars from tax revenue from cannabis. Anyway, I'm just appalled that these liberals have no sense of reason when they isolate 50% of the voting public because they're right-wing, and they're flying with just half a bird, half a wing, half a wingspan, one wing of two. They're flying in a circle, chasing their own tail. That's not why things like Sensible Washington's I-1068 didn't pass. That's why I-1149 didn't pass. Too much infighting. Too much liberal, progressive, nonsense politics. And, you know, George Soros funds Antifa and funds Black Lives Matter. He gave $100 million to Black Lives Matter, millions of dollars to Antifa groups. And these are the ones that are violent, burning cities, you know, ripping people out of cars, beating them, you know, breaking, rioting and breaking windows and, you know, doing all that in like the G20 and stuff. He's funding those groups, giving them big money, and yet they're fine to support him. They'll take his money. They'll take his, you know, efforts. George Soros is their man. But when it comes to somebody who they think might be not on their side completely, they'll label him everything from a Nazi to a racist to a xenophobe. But they won't take into account that George Soros was, in fact, a Nazi. They don't care, as long as the money keeps coming.